It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and of course, you are listening to the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. In case you missed it, almost a week ago, the little groundhog named Phil, what a brilliant name, but unfortunately, he has predicted 6 more weeks of winter. Ironically, it's almost 60 degrees here in the first week of February 2017 in central Illinois, so we've got all that great fun. Also, just a quick FYI, somewhere in the next few weeks or months, I might skip a show or two. I'm in the process of moving from Champaign, Illinois to New Lenox, Illinois, which is a far southwest Chicago suburb, about 40 miles southwest of Chicago, near where I-80 and I-355 meet. So if you're in that area, I will be joining you soon, but I've got to pack and move and put my house up on the market. Lots and lots of things to do, and I probably in a few weeks. I didn't want to do it right away because I just talked about home loans recently. Talk about the mathematics behind why paying PMI is not so bad, and I'll get into that in another show. But there's your little teaser. Today, apparently, I'm going to have to talk about the fiduciary rule. See, I think I said it right. You'll let me know if I did it wrong. For some reason, that word eludes me. There's a lot going on with the new administration. Dare I call him President Trump? I think he officially won. But anyway, one of the things that I predicted right after his election is that somewhere in February, and here we are, he and or the Republicans would rescind the rules for the fiduciary rule. Wow. The Department of Labor issued rules, and I'm going to go into that in a few minutes, what the rules are and what may happen to those rules. Of course, before I get too far into that, I want to make sure you are aware that later in the show, we're going to have a really long and wonderful interview with John W. Loftus. He's written many books about religion, about atheism, about Christianity, and its lack of evidence and lack of support. And his newest book talks about why there should be an end to the teaching of the philosophy of religion as a course, as a subject matter, as something that universities should be doing because it simply substantiates something without evidence. So I think you'll enjoy that if you're into philosophy. It's going to be a show a little bit more on philosophy than normal. Sometimes philosophy really kind of glasses my eyes over. I get lost when someone wants to have the argument about truth with a big T versus a little t, or going into details about ontological arguments and things like that. Because, quite frankly, a lot of times I consider that really close to verbal masturbation. And quite frankly, when someone says they have evidence for God and they give an argument, okay, maybe I'm technically wrong here from philosophical point of view. I'm just a dude who I knew numbers. I don't do philosophy. An argument is not evidence. We don't go to the moon because we made an argument that we think we could get there. It takes science. It takes actual evidence, and you have to document and check and verify. So arguments are great and can be very productive and useful in the world. So I'm not saying philosophy is not useful, but if you want to present evidence, or if you want to claim that you have evidence for your deity, and all you've got is an argument, I don't give a shit. I really don't want to fucking hear it. Because if your deity is so brilliant that the only way he, she, it can be detected is because you can make some kind of word salad argument to kind of support your position, great. Not evidence. Move on. Find me some evidence. When you have that, come back to me. If all you can do is argue about it, then all you've done is argue about it. You've not given me evidence. Anyway, we're going to go into more of that with John W. Loftus after we learn all about it. Again, sadly, we're talking about this topic, the fiduciary rule, which may no longer be effective, but you'll have to hang on to find out. So before we jump into the fiduciary rule and what it is, again, I was thinking, and I was just going to refer you back to a previous show, but it looks like it's been many months. Talked about this in great detail in show number 165, but that was April from 2016, almost a year ago. So many new listeners that probably haven't gone back and heard that old show that we're going to cover some of that material again. So we will enjoy that. Of course, coming up, I have other great interviews already in the can. I just got to put them on the show. I've got an interview with Hemet Mehta, who is known as the Friendly Atheist, or as I like to call him, the not quite so friendly atheist anymore. He's become a little more jaded over the years, and it can happen. And Cara Santa Maria, who has her own podcast, and she's also one of the rogues on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. So great interviews. You're going to enjoy those. They're the best interviews. I mean, they're really the best interviews, best show, of course. Speaking of which, a couple quick notes about reviews from listeners. I did get an email, and I've got to go to the other computer here. This is from SM, and I'll just give initials because I don't know if I have their permission to use their names. I know that you said it wasn't a big deal in the podcast, but congrats on 200 episodes. To be technically true, it's episode 200. I cheated. It's kind of like when you get checks that start with 1,000. I did start the show at 100, so it's the 100th episode. However, before I did have a show called Skeptic Money on Air, and before that I was on another podcast. So I've done around 200 episodes. I decided to start at 100 because I didn't want there to be any confusion with the other show sequence, but it also helped that it's a bigger number. So I cheated. So I haven't done 200 episodes technically of the Phil Ferguson Show. But anyway, that we've done 200. Actually, today is 201st episode, 201st number, 200, show number 201, I think is the proper way to say it. So anyway, the email goes on. I can only imagine the time and resources you've invested into the podcast. So I think 200 episodes, episode number 200, is an awesome milestone. Thanks for your continued activism and sharing secular-based investing education with your eager audience. Well, that is very, very kind, and I thank you for that immensely. I also had a review on Stitcher, and that one is from Renee, and this is what Renee said. I learn something every time I listen to the show, and I appreciate his efforts to combat religion because sometimes it feels as if we are fighting for our freedoms in that department. It hasn't really affected me personally, but I know it affects a lot of people. And, sometimes there's silly laws and people are at risk of losing liberties and breaking down the wall of separation between church and state, especially with the current administration. So those are things to worry about, and we will continue the good fight. So the fiduciary rule. So in basic, go back a couple steps. If you hire an attorney, you expect that they work for you. They have to work in your best interest, and they have an actual legal responsibility to do so. And matter of fact, if you go to Investopedia, which is one of the places I like to get information about investing, I recommend it all the time. It's really nice because while it does have financial ads that you should ignore, it's not put up by a specific company. It's kind of like Wikipedia, but for investments. What they say here is that the fiduciary is the new law will automatically elevate all financial professionals who work with retirement plans or provide retirement planning advice to the level of fiduciary that is bound legally and ethically to meet the standards of that status. So the new rule would require 90 to 95% of the industry to change what they're doing now, which is being salespeople. And as a salesperson, they can do lots and lots of things. They can recommend lots of things, and they can recommend things that are advantageous to themselves, and I would argue often more advantageous to themselves than they are to you. So someone could recommend an annuity to you. Say you have $100,000 to invest, one-time lump sum, instead of putting it in a portfolio that makes a really nice return for you over time, considering risk and rewards and all those things. They could instead of come up with a rational argument, which may be mostly true, why you should have an annuity, although the mathematics doesn't work out for you. What they could tell you in pieces is true, and they could make up to a 10, 12, 15% commission, or making $15,000. So if you are a salesperson, what would you rather make? 1% per year, taking 15 years of service and support and help to make money, or 15% one time, bam, you're done? And could I have convinced myself, or can that salesperson convince themselves they're doing the right thing for you? Sure they can. It's very easy to believe things when your income depends on it. So that's one of the problems with the way the system is set up. They can promote things, and I often say that financial advisors, and I have my air quotes up for the radio listener, the financial advisor is not paid to know how things work. They are paid to sell things. They are paid to sell things to you. That's the way the system is set up. Not necessarily bad, although I think it is inherently a conflict of interest. They make a whole bunch of money up front, and you may or may not make money in the long run. That's why I like a fee-based advisor like myself, and I tell people, my goal is for you to make more and more money over time, because as your account gets bigger, my fee gets bigger. It's a different philosophical perspective. So at least in my mind, you and I would have the same objective, for you to become rich, because I get to ride on your tailcoats and get a percentage of that. But the fiduciary rule would require a whole lot of things that are sold today to be not allowed, unless the company goes out of their way to detail to you exactly the expenses you're paying, the fees you're paying, the commission that's going to be paid, and it becomes very, very complicated and cumbersome for them to do that, and quite a good chunk of customers might be scared off. So the financial services industry does not want to engage in that, and they have been fighting this rule that was put out by the Department of Labor, not the SEC, which is something that a lot of companies are complaining because the SEC should have put out this rule. Well, yes, they fucking should have, but they didn't. Congress should have made this rule, but they didn't. So people at the Department of Labor spent years on this. They consulted people in the industry. They modified it. They changed it. And in some ways they weakened it. In some ways they improved it so that the industry could actually do it. And the industry spent hundreds of millions of dollars fighting it. And they're still fighting it today. And like I mentioned earlier in the show, I expected that Republicans and or Trump would end this rule because it goes into effect in April of 2017, just 2 months from now. And up until very, very recently, I had every expectation that the Republicans would kill this. And apparently Trump and his administration, whatever kind of circus they're running in the White House, had said that they're going to start with a 180-day delay. Now, the 180-day delay means that gives them 180 days to repeal and replace? No. To fix it? No. To find out logical arguments that may not be very good, but good enough to explain why it shouldn't go into place and then kill it? Fine. Well, what Trump did instead, which was amazing, which no one had seen coming, is he actually made another executive order. It's interesting that people that hated Obama's executive orders, and I wasn't necessarily a big fan of all of them, now love some of those people love Trump's order. So I'm reading this from whitehouse.gov, which it's hysterical because the first paragraph on whitehouse.gov is there twice. But I'm going to read a little bit about it here. One of my priorities of my administration is to empower Americans to make their own financial decisions, to facilitate their ability to save for retirement and build the individual wealth necessary to afford typical lifetime expenses, such as buying a home, paying for college, and to withstand unexpected financial emergencies. Really? Well, that'd be nice. That sounds great. And of course, that sentence, I guess, is repeated again, which just shows you the sloppiness of this administration. It continues. The term fiduciary or conflict of interest rule, retirement investment advice, and it goes into the numbers here of what the rule is called, may significantly alter the manner in which Americans can receive financial advice and may not be consistent with the policies of my administration. I'm not sure what his policies are, but okay. So it might change the way advice is given. Yeah, it might. It might require people to actually give fucking advice instead of selling shit to you. He continues, accordingly, by the authority vested in me as president, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, I hereby direct the following. So he's now doing his order. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can do it at whitehouse.gov. Section 1 of this order, Department of Labor Review of Fiduciary Duty Rule. You are directed to examine the fiduciary duty rule to determine whether it may adversely affect the ability of Americans to gain access to retirement information and financial advice. As part of this examination, you shall prepare an updated economic and legal analysis concerning the likely impact of the fiduciary rule, which shall consider, among other things, the following. And then he gives different things that the Department of Labor is supposed to look at, is obligated to look at by his royal decree. So I don't know how the president has any involvement in this or can order departments to do things. I'm not sure of the constitutionality of this order. I am not that expert in law, so I'm a little at a loss. It seems weird because this seems like something Congress could do. And to the best of my knowledge, the Department of Labor is well within their rights to make rules, at least under previous administrations and Congresses. So what he's really wanting them to do is come up with justifications and reasons why their rule is too expensive and why it causes problems. And the Department of Labor had their own response, which they published, which is wonderful. Here's the response. The Department of Labor will now consider its legal options to delay the applicability date as we comply with the President's memorandum. I can't speak or read today, but so they're going to consider their options. Okay. They're complying to best they can, and they're going to consider what to do next. So the question is it delayed? It doesn't look like it. Is the Department of Labor being asked to look at it to consider delaying it? Yeah, but the rule goes into place in a few weeks. And large financial institutions have to make plans based on what the rules are going to be in a few weeks. So it's going to create chaos. People aren't going to know what to do, how to do it. And if you wanted to fuck everything up and sow confusion, this is a great way to do it. Does the law go into place? Yes. Is it going to be enforced? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. I really wish I knew more. I really wish I could say, yes, we're going to have this. Now, as far as the rule, one of the things that people often will quote is that this will prevent investment advisors, again, I use the term loosely, from a big company helping somebody with a smaller account. There is kind of merit to that in a way, and it's the same problem that I have, is that I'm just myself, and at some point I run out of time. I run out of the ability to help people, so I have to start putting in minimums, which I've done. If you don't have an account of this size, I can't set up an account and manage it and review it because I have a limit to what I can do. I still generally, if you're under 100,000, you can contact me and we can set up a time to talk, and I will answer any and all questions that you have and give you some suggestions at how to get going. But without that number, I just can't. And so a company like A.J. Edwards or Edward Jones, John Hancock, all those companies, all of their advisors, all of their salespeople, they prefer bigger accounts than smaller accounts. They pay better. I mean, it's straightforward. I'm not telling you any secrets. But if they're saying basically if I can't take 5 or 10% of your money via commission to give you advice, again, the radio air quotes up, then I'm not going to do it. The average consumer might actually be better off. If you don't know what you're doing, learn what you're doing. It is one of those things that continually surprises me that people just really don't want to do financial advising. They don't want to learn and research. Most people will spend far more time researching which model of cell phone to get next when they're available for an update than they spend figuring out how to invest for their entire lifetime. It's fine. We all make those choices, but it's something we could do. But the idea, the premise of his memorandum, his declaration here, that by allowing people more choices, by allowing people to be ripped off, it's okay. I had someone say on my Facebook wall that if people are making bad investments and they underperform, that's their problem. Kind of a libertarian view, and maybe I'm misstating the libertarian view here, so forgive me, libertarians. I'll worry about you on some other issues. But if people are getting ripped off, is that okay just because they don't know? Is there an obligation that the government has to protect these people? I think so, just like I think we should have rules that protect me from lead paint or protect my kids from lead paint, because I don't have the skill and the technology to analyze the contents of the paint that I buy. We make rules collectively as a society, and collectively as a society, I think advisors should be providing advice for the benefit of the person that they're providing the advice to. I don't know why that's so complicated. To the best of my knowledge, every other modern country in the world, and I specifically know for England and Italy because I've talked to advisors that I've met over the years there, they laugh at our system that the advisors aren't held to be responsible for giving the advice. Now, it doesn't mean that if I recommend, because I act as a fiduciary now and have been for 20 years, and my company, Polaris Financial Planning, is set up as a registered investment advisor, and we follow under that higher level of requirement. It doesn't mean that if I say put your money in the stock market and the stock market goes down 30%, you're not going to lose money. In the long run, that was good advice. In the short run, it sucked. It sucked really bad. But I don't know what's going to happen in the next year, which is why I might tell someone who comes to me and says, I'm saving up money to put a down payment on a house. What do I do with it? And I'm like, well, you can make 2 or 3% in bonds unless you want to take more risk. You could get some CDs. You could put it in the bank. You're not going to make a whole lot of money, especially with $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 if you're saving for a house. You're not going to make a lot of money. If you want to put it in the stock market and make 10, 15, 20%, if you're lucky, you also have to face the possibility you might lose 25%, or like 2008, which is an extreme example, but it happens, where you lose 37% in 1 year, which means you're not buying your house, maybe. So your plans get affected. So it depends on what you want the money for. When do you want the money? But for retirement money, for long-term money, the stock market is a great place to be. And you want to keep your costs low. You want to keep your expenses low. You want to have low-cost index funds. But low-cost index funds, like the ones I recommend, they don't pay me anything. If I worked for another company and there were certain fund families that paid me to recommend them, an advisor could, and most of them do, give recommendations of funds that pay the advisor. So they can tell you something like, you don't pay anything for their advice. Well, not directly, but the client always pays. And when I get told it costs me nothing to get advice, I kind of think the advice is not worth a whole lot. So anyway, that's the fiduciary rule, at least in basic. There's a lot of complexities to it, which I've covered before. I don't want to go over because it may or may not be in place. It may or may not be delayed. And I will try to give you updates as it becomes clear, but it first looked like they were going to be delayed for 180 days, and now it looks like they're not. But of course, at any time, despite what Trump says, the Republicans can still vote in Congress. They can make a law that supersedes the authority of the rule and crush the whole thing, which I'm still predicting. So why Trump didn't push for this, or maybe he's saying, I tried to make this, and he wants the Department of Labor to make a report that says, yeah, what they came up with was crap. What do you think they're going to come up with? So that's some information about the fiduciary rule. We'll keep you posted as that goes on. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back with John W. Loftus.
An atheist loves his fellow man instead of a God. An atheist thinks that heaven is something for which we should work now, here on earth, for all men together to enjoy. An atheist knows that he can get no help through prayer, but that he must find in himself the inner conviction and strength to meet life, to grapple with it, to subdue it, to enjoy it. An atheist knows that only in a knowledge of himself and a knowledge of his fellow man can he find the understanding that will help to a life of personal and societal fulfillment. An atheist then seeks to know himself and his fellow rather than to know a God. An atheist knows that a hospital should be built instead of a church. An atheist knows that a deed must be done instead of a prayer said. An atheist strives for involvement in life and not escape into death. He wants disease conquered, poverty vanished, war eliminated. He wants man to understand and love man. He wants an ethical way of life. He knows that he cannot rely on God, cannot channel action into prayer, and that there is no hope for any troubles, solutions in a hereafter. He knows that we are our brother's keeper. He knows that we're the keeper of our own lives, that we are responsible people, and that the job is here, and the time is now.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Of course, this is the Phil Ferguson, and I am your host, Phil Ferguson. With me today, we have John W. Loftus, who I think many titles will apply, but for today, we're going to start with author and discuss some of his books. John, are you with me?
I am. Thanks for having me on.
Well, my pleasure, John. And you know what? You are probably going to be in the category of a first today. You know why?
No, I can't guess.
This is the first time I've interviewed somebody about a brand new book that, just came out literally a month or two ago, while I can see that you're the author of an upcoming brand new book in only a few months. So you're very busy at this process, huh?
Yeah, I guess so. I can't attribute it to my mom or apple pie, but I just have a passion for communicating, and it turned into basically 10 books in basically 10 years. And I'm weary of the process, I'll tell you that. But it's a lot of information out there, a lot of stuff that I've written and had others help me write, and by writing chapters for me. That I'm pretty happy about that.
Well, I think I would describe you maybe as an expert on, and dare I use it, and I'm going to tease the listener for a minute, the philosophy of religion.
Well, I suppose that's one title that could be given me. I don't claim to be too much of anything, but I've had some degrees in the very topic of philosophy of religion, 3 master's degrees and some PhD work in related fields. So, yes, that's true.
Now, let's go back a little bit and give some background. And did you grow up in religion?
Most of us. I was raised a Catholic, and I had a dramatic conversion, became a Pentecostal, and went to a church where my mom and dad decided to go to just about the same time, and became a Christian in the Churches of Christ. Graduated from a couple of their colleges, went on to some more college and some more college. I became a minister in the same, non-denomination, and was a budding apologist. Written a few things on behalf of Christianity, and then I became a non-believer, and now I write in the opposite direction.
Well, so you left Christianity, and you did it for the big paycheck that you were going to get as an atheist, right?
Once in a while, I think to myself, you know what, if I recanted my present position and embraced Jesus again, I could get more money. So the billing would be atheist turns Christian, or really, important headline, something like that, I suppose, and I could probably get more money. So if I was in it for the money, I suppose, that would be one way to get a bigger paycheck. But no, I can't do that.
Yeah. I've heard that argument many times, and I think I've made it a few myself. But so you were studying, or you actually were a minister?
Oh, yeah. I was a minister probably for about 14 years. I had a wide variety of positions and titles, but the main three would be I was a youth minister for 2.5 years in a church just prior to going to seminary, and then I was an interim minister for several churches. I would go and preach for them on Sundays when their minister was either sick or on vacation or even in between ministries. I did a lot of those types of gigs. And then I was a solo minister. That is a minister of a small congregation of about 60 to 80, maybe about 90 on Easter, near Christmas. Right. And then I became a senior minister, where I had a secretary and a youth minister, under me, and of a bigger church of about 240, maybe 300 on Easter. So I had those ministry type positions along with sitting on several boards and participating in several different projects all the time.
Right, and I just wanted to make sure the listeners understood that this was not just an academic title. You actually, in the field for more than a decade, did this work in person.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you did mention multiple master's degrees. What are those master's degrees?
Well, after getting a Bachelor of Religious Education at Great Lakes Christian College, I went to Lincoln Christian Seminary, and I got 2 master's degrees there. I got a Master of Arts and a Master of Divinity. The Divinity degree is an unusual type of degree. I don't know, they kind of tack that on. I don't know why exactly. It's a degree in ministerial studies. It's a degree that ministers get. And but yeah, it's also an academic one. It covers a host of subjects that are intellectual as well as practical. And then I went on to Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, where I met and studied under William Lane Craig. That's where you cue the boo.
Yep, that's right. I'll have to edit that back in later.
And delightful guy. I mean, honestly, and enjoyed studying with him. He used the basically European model of teaching, where we sat around and we discussed books that he would assign us with questions. And he didn't offer tests, but he did make us, participate and present a paper and then write a paper in class, and we had to defend what we wrote. So I didn't actually know he was going to be as famous as he ended up being famous at the time, because I was studying there in about 83, 84. And but he did become quite famous. So then when I became an atheist and wrote my first book, it got some attention. And I didn't even realize at the time I wrote the book, because it was self-published, that he had gotten as famous as he was. I wasn't really that much of an online type person at the time it first came out. And all of a sudden it got a lot of attention. So I didn't just feel say, well, you're writing on his coattails. Well, I didn't even know there were any coattails to write on when I first wrote my book. But it was quite a learning experience to study with what would be considered one of the best apologists of our generation. And then I turned his arguments in reverse in my books. I'm actually thinking about the possibility, as a remote possibility, of writing a book just covering the various topics that he writes about.
Now, what is the first book? Just to make sure.
Well, the very first book, it was self-published. It's Why I Rejected Christianity. That turned into the book Why I Became an Atheist by Prometheus Books. And then I got a revised edition. I consider that my second published book. And it's like a whopping 500-something pages, and I never want to do that again.
Now,
ever. Now, under any circumstances. For any amount of money.
Sure.
Don't try to talk me into it either.
You've also published The End of Christianity.
Yes.
The Outsider Test for Faith.
Yep, correct.
Which, if I can be so bold, you have made the Outsider Test for Faith kind of a famous thing. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I think the famous thing about it would be the naming of it. What are we going to call this thing that people have used from the beginning of religion to reject religion? And I didn't know at the time that it would, be as famous, as a name. And it's pretty well descriptive.
Yeah.
That is, judge your own religion from the outside as if you never were born with it, never had it in the first place. Yeah. So that's the famous part of it, and I just simply defend things that people have done from, like I said, as long as religion has been around, to reject religion, and that is that they just simply test their own religion from the outside.
I like it, and I know that came up in the most recent book that I'm working my way up to. I got so many books I got to mention here. We also have The Christian Delusion.
Yep, based on Richard Dawkins' best-selling book, The God Delusion.
Right, and not to mention... go ahead.
The thing is that the thing that I mean when I say it's based on it is that it's a takeoff from it, an obvious takeoff from it. And whereas he's attacking, God belief as a, incredible, even the irrational type of belief, what we do in the Christian delusion is we focus on the Christian God in specific, or the Christianized gods. And in it, I was able to get a bunch of scholars that would write individual chapters on select topics that are crucial to the case against Christianity, and it has a remarkable amount of readership. So I'm really happy about that. That's actually my first anthology.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, all of those, I think I have read, or more appropriately, listened to all of them, because I have very difficult time sitting still and reading a book, but I love it when it's being read to me. And depending on who is doing the narration, I might even be able to speed it up considerably. And the brand new book, Unapologetic.
Yes, Unapologetic, and the subtitle is Why Philosophy of Religion Must End.
Right. And
yeah, go ahead.
And it was interesting because right from the very beginning, it was very clear the intent of the book. And I was actually kind of like cheering on you, a.k.a. the narrator, as I was listening to the book and thinking, why has no one really, or at least why have I not been aware of someone writing a book on this before? And so why don't you first explain, make sure the listeners understand, and I'm sure most of them do, but what is philosophy of religion, and give me kind of a nice case, why should it end?
Oh, okay. Well, first off, talk about what it is. What is philosophy of religion? If you ask philosophers of religion who teach in the field what it is, they would disagree with themselves about what philosophy of religion is. I've seen a website where different philosophers weigh in, and they don't actually engage with each other so much as they just simply come up with different concepts about what it is to have the philosophy of religion. And they stretch anywhere from the rational discussion of a set of beliefs to understanding religion in general. I suppose just the act of understanding religion. The opposite spectrum of just understanding religion is actually, I argue, not even philosophy of religion. It's comparative religion, or it's just religion itself, or psychology of religion. And the main goal of comparative religion, anthropology of religion, and other sorts of classes like that and disciplines is basically to understand religion. I think I have gravitated towards that as a very good defensible position on how we should treat religion, and that is just treat them all the same. Let's just try to understand them, and I think it's a valid thing to do. Let's understand, because there's so much ignorance about what religion is and how people come to believe it and why they believe it, that it's enough sometimes just to simply understand it, because it becomes ludicrous to think that these religions, various religions, stretching from, say, Scientology to Heaven's Gate, even branches of Christianity and Muslim theology and Orthodox Judaism. It becomes ludicrous to think that any one of them is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. So philosophy of religion, the kind I attack isn't that kind, the kind that is basically to be called anthropology of religion or comparative religion. It's this idea that philosophy of religion is discipline is to rationally examine the tenets of certain select religious beliefs or religion itself. And that itself is a controversial kind of claim, but if I can simply make that claim, that is, this kind of philosophy of religion must end, then I've done my book justice.
Well, I've always wondered myself, in the Department of Philosophy, I guess this is going to be, if you apply philosophical processes and tests and use rational thinking, doesn't one inevitably come up with the fact that religion doesn't make sense?
Well, good point. And I that's my position, of course, that to rationally examine religious beliefs is to, evaluate them based on, evidence. I call it scientific reasoning, or reasoning based on evidence, or evidential reasoning, something like that. That kind of reasoning that's based in evidence destroys religious faith. It just does. But another way to destroy it is to simply treat all religions the same. So yeah, I take that to be the case. It's just this, that if we treat religious beliefs seriously, then which ones will we treat seriously? That's the whole point, I think, that if we start treating evangelical Christianity, for instance, and its tenets seriously, then what we're doing is we're elevating those beliefs over the other religious beliefs that are out there, saying this, that they're more serious, that they have more to them, that there's more evidence to them. That's why we pick them out of a number of other kinds of religious beliefs out there for examination. And that kind of thing basically is giving, say, evangelicals who dominate in the philosophy departments, the philosophy of religion departments, it basically gives them credibility because, look, there's a professional philosopher dealing with my concept of hell, where I say that people don't burn in hell, they just suffer for all of eternity. And who wants to give them that kind of credibility? Let's treat all concepts of the afterlife the same way, and we don't treat any of them seriously. So why should we pick this one out and treat it seriously? It's giving them undue credibility, is what I claim.
Yeah, and I love the many good points, so I do recommend the book to the listeners, so hopefully you can sell a couple of more copies, because the show's not that big, but please go buy the book. Now, one of the thoughts is that I really liked is not just teaching Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism, as you mentioned in the book, but why not religions that are no longer generally practiced today? Because they didn't die out because they were less true. They died out because their followers died out. So why would they have less merit to be taught? So you have literally hundreds, if not thousands. I mean, you can whittle it down to ones that maybe only ever had more than a million followers or something, and you'd still have hundreds of religions. How do you pick one form to be the one that gets discussed?
Exactly. There's no criteria that I know of that says that the one true correct religion must survive into the future from the past. I mean, why is it then that we think that the dead religions of the past have no credibility or no truth to them, or that they themselves aren't true just because no one believes them anymore? Even God in the days of the Old Testament threatened to eradicate his people, which would, of course, eradicate, I think, his religion, if he existed at all, which, of course, we don't. He didn't. So the one true God out there, who had the one true religion one time in the past, might have gotten so fed up with his people that he destroyed them all, and with it, his religion. I mean, we have examples of that, a potential example of that in the Old Testament. So let's treat all these religions, because they're non-evidence types of belief systems. I mean, I just have never seen any good evidence for any of them, any faith-based claim. So let's just treat them all the same. And once you do that, then they just don't have any more credibility than the others. And so I don't think Christianity in any given form has any more credibility than Scientology. And people might get down on my throat and say, well, how can you say that? Well, give Scientology another another millennia, perhaps, and maybe it might appear that it has more credibility to it. It's just a matter of time and the fact that you might have more babies than the other religious adherents have. And apparently, given the number of births, Islam is going to be, a dominant religion of the future. And they do that not because of credibility, not because of the evidence, not because it's more reasonable, because they have more babies.
Right. And it's interesting because when I was 12 and 13, there were two things, and thankfully for me, I got out of religion much sooner than you did. There were two things that really stuck in my craw. One was what happened to all the old gods? Because I was really into Greek and Roman gods and wondered, well, people thought they were real back then. What happened? So it was kind of that concept. And the other one that drove me nuts, and I know you talked about it in the book, so I want to ask you about it, but was this idea that someone would ask me, where did the universe come from? And I would say, I don't know. And someone else would say, well, God made it. And I said, well, where did God come from? And they go, I don't know. And so it seemed like an unnecessary step to get us to the same answer. Is there a formal name for that kind of argument, that God made it, but we don't have to explain God?
Well, not to get too philosophical here, because I just think that all these types of argumentations lead nowhere. They could, we could spend a whole, long time on some of those sorts of things.
I'm sure we could.
And stuff. It's just what they have in their heads is the same kind of belief-forming mechanism that other religions have. And it's really bizarre to me that they use the same arguments and come away with the different conclusions. Like they'll always use, fine-tuning, or Scotch-shaped vacuum, or where did God come from if he didn't come from himself? And yet they'll point to different religions as a result, like the Mormons, the Muslims, the Orthodox Jews, and they'll use those same kind of arguments to lead to the same, religions. And my contention is that they can't do that. My contention is that the Jews no more believe that Jesus arose from the dead than I do as an atheist. So the Jews are atheists with regard to the resurrection of Jesus. In fact, they're outsiders, going back to the outsider test for faith. They just don't treat their own religious tenets as outsiders, and because they don't, this is, like you say, irrelevant. It's unnecessary, or that's how you said it. Simon Laplace said that when Napoleon asked him why he didn't evoke God in his astronomy. It's an unnecessary hypothesis. So unnecessary hypotheses are just that, and we can simply ignore them. I mean, they have no... If there was a nebulous God out there, let's say it this way, if there was one who did create, we don't know anything about that God. We don't know whether he's good or evil. We don't know whether he communicated or he didn't. We don't know if he acted in history or if he's a he. We know nothing about such a being at all. And yet it's the religious content that's added to that God concept that makes the religion in the first place. So I have no need for a nebulous God, and no Christian, no Hindu, no Muslim would ever care to defend a nebulous God with no content to it. None. They would just go on with their lives and live as if God didn't exist, just as if I did, just as I do. Because a nebulous God like that, it makes no demands, offers no promises. We know nothing aside from what we can learn from science about the universe anyway. So why don't we just learn about the universe, from science and just dispense with the God concept? He may, and say something like this: she may exist or may not, but since it makes no difference in my life, it makes no difference in my life. Let me just continue living my life the way I am and not even care about it. So once you don't care about something like that, then for all intents and purposes, it ceases to exist. Well, so all these arguments, all these questions that they ask that they think are unanswerable are really boiled down to what you said. It's unnecessary. They're just simply unnecessary.
Well, it kind of seems to me like it's basically verbal masturbation. And you come up with a string of hypotheses that make you sound like you're being all official and everything. But one of the points you were making is that even if it did come up with the fact that there is a deity. It's a deist god, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's Yahweh, and it doesn't mean that it's Zeus. It even if it worked, and I don't think it does, because it's just a word game. It's word salad, and it sounds fancy. But another topic that's in your book that relates to this specifically is virtually no one ever has decided to become a Christian or probably any other religion because of one of these arguments. These are arguments that people make after they have decided to, or after they've willingly chosen to, or unwillingly chosen to, but after they already believe in the religion. Then they kind of create these post hoc rationalizations for something they believed. Am I getting to that essence correctly?
Well, I don't think I said virtually no one. If I said that, people might call
that might be me.
C.S. Lewis did, they'll say, and any more, a lot of these Christian apologists are claiming to have been atheists, and now they're Christians. I think Lee Strobel says so. I think it's kind of from the backlash of so many former Christian intellectuals who are now atheists that they have to say the same thing. I think David Wood says the same thing. He used to be an atheist, but now he's a Christian. And we have to ask ourselves, what kind of atheist, were you?
Yeah, like Kirk Cameron. He was an atheist too. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, see, there are people who actually, I would make the argument that we're all practical atheists, if nothing else. I mean, nobody lives as if there's a hell that you're going to go to if you don't believe. Nobody lives that way. They just have to think for 1 minute. What would you do if you actually thought there was an eternal hell of fire that people are going to? How would you actually live? What would you do with your money? What would you do with your time? I mean, Christians are not living as if there's a God. I mean, they're all practical atheists. So they can always say, well, I used to be an atheist and now I'm a Christian. Well, of course you were. You're still an atheist.
Well, when you want to put it, into practical life, one of the thoughts I've always had is, why do Christians cry at a funeral?
Oh yeah, right. I saw that video by someone on that. I thought it was kind of cool, describing people who are leaving on a ship and everybody cries. That's at least you know you're going to see that person again. But when they die, then somehow you cry uncontrollably and you're despondent for like weeks or maybe months.
Yeah, and I've had Christians defend that, saying, well, they're going to miss them until they get to see them. And like you said, with this ship analogy, which I'm going to have to figure out what that is, because that sounds pretty cool. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I mean, because if you really, and assuming for a moment the human mind could handle the concept of eternity, and I'm not sure that we can, at least I don't know that I can properly. If I'm going to live in eternity, not seeing you for 10 or 15 or 20 years or 40 if I'm really fucking lucky, compared to eternity is trivial. I would be like, yeah, thankfully your suffering is over. You're in a better place. But that's generally not the reaction people have.
Right. Now back to the virtually no one is converted from the arguments. Let me say it this way. I think not very many at all are converted because of the arguments. And those who are converted because of the arguments are not converted reasonably. Something's going on that's wrong in their heads. I mean, they're not treating evidence as evidence, and they're trying to discount evidence. And who knows? Maybe it's because of a significant other that we're not really as reasonable as we think we are. And if everybody we meet has a big smile on your face, and you like them, and they believe, all of a sudden, before you know it, if you hang around them for too long, and you say your rosary, then you could force yourself into belief. You could make yourself believe. The brain is that malleable. And so those are people who have been converted because of external circumstances unrelated to the arguments. But most all of us have been brought up to believe. That's the point. Most all of us have been trained to believe by years of childhood training, to believe in different kinds of religions and different kinds of paranormal claims. And what I'm arguing is that now that you're an adult, you need to re-examine the reasons that were given to you for the belief you have now. And you need to do so as an adult, as an outsider, to see whether those things have merit. And my claim is that if they actually were to reasonably look at their religious faith and the reasons for it and the evidence or lack of thereof, which is my claim, that's all it is, the lack of evidence, then you wouldn't believe at all. All right. So what these apologists do is, not looking at their faith as an outsider, they decide that the inside is the way to look at their own religion. They concoct arguments. They fabricate them. They come up with reasons to believe because that's what they have a need to do now that they're inside this Christian community, and they get rewarded with pats on the back. The better they make these arguments, and the better their reasoning process is in their head. So, yeah, they come up with arguments after the fact to bolster their faith. It's plain as day.
So if those arguments aren't particularly valuable, and I think we agree that they aren't, does faith itself have value?
Well, there's two senses in which you can look at faith, and one is just look at it in terms of unevidenced type of a hope, if you will, or trust, if you will, an unevidenced type of trust. In fact, Christians define faith as trust in God. Well, how do you come to the belief in your God in the first place? Is what I want to know. I mean, how do you want to trust somebody you've never seen? How can you trust somebody that has so-called authored the Bible and motivated Christians as they slaughtered people in His name? How do you learn to trust that kind of God who, sends tornadoes and hurricanes and forest fires and who knows what? Well, they still want to trust that God, and I'm saying that trust is unevidenced because of what we see in the world and in the Bible and in history. So, but they still define faith as trust. It's a misplaced trust. It's an irrational trust. It's an unreasonable trust. And so that kind of trust is nothing I want to be a part of. It's a vice. It's not a virtue. To come to believe in God and in His ways, and say the Bible or the Quran, is if it's based on that kind of faith, that's just irrational. It's just unreasonable. It's a cognitive bias that dupes them into thinking they have reasons for belief when they don't.
Fair enough. Now, one of the other things that you talked about in the book in regards to this philosophy of religion concept as far as a educational program inside of a university, you were making the appeal that knocking down or criticizing or questioning, I guess maybe is the right word, a student's faith by the teacher should not be perceived as a problem. The teacher should not remain purely neutral like a lot of philosophy professors do and let the students argue, or the professor will often, lean in on the side that's, the weaker argument or the less support in the side of the class, but should actually help students understand that faith is not a reliable process of getting to truth.
Exactly. And that's going against the grain of thought. That's why atheist philosophers and wannabe philosophers will and have been arguing against, the book, the little scatterings of things that I've seen. But they call that teaching students what to believe, not how to believe, or not. They're against teaching students what to believe. I'll put it that way. But I think that it's proven as you can ever prove a fact, that faith gets us nowhere. It adds nothing to the probability. So I see no reason why the atheist professors, can't just simply tell them the truth and placate them and put balms on their wounds so that they feel better after being slashed by the evidence that's available against faith. So yes, if it's about telling students what to believe, what to believe. I don't want to use that word belief right now, but if this teaching students truth, let's do it this way. If it's teaching the students the truth, then yes, by all means, let's teach them the truth. Faith is an unreliable guide to knowing the truth about the universe, how we got here, where the universe is going, and how to live our lives. I just think that there should be nothing wrong with telling students the truth. And rather than say something like an Oprah Winfrey show or a Donahue show, if you're a little older, well, what do you think about that? Well, I don't know. Well, what do you think about that? And let everybody have a voice of opinion as if there's no truth about it. Well, there is truth, and faith is not a way to get to it.
Well, and one of the nice things in the book is a comparison between, a mathematics class or a chemistry class or a physics class. Even, maybe history is a little more open to interpretation because each person has their opinion. But in philosophy, it's not necessarily the outcome that you want to guide them to, but the process. And if your process is faith, the student needs to be informed, or maybe your argument should be informed, that process is devoid of value.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think you did in the book, but it went on and on with the examples and details, and maybe that's why I was so able to articulate it, because I was just listening to it. And, of course, you'd mentioned early on one of your mentors or a teacher in one of your classes, more appropriately probably, William Lane Craig.
Yes.
Are you
Craig.
up to debating him, or is he up to debating you, I guess is the more important question.
Oh, he's a really good debater. I mean,
he is.
Debates are entertaining, and we like to see a good boxing match, and we bet on our guy in the ring or gal, and we can learn something from it. It doesn't solve the issues, and I remember talking to Bill after a debate. He said, "Well, if both debaters are prepared, then it shouldn't be a lopsided win in either direction." And I think that's how he sees debates. And he wins a lot of them because he is prepared, and he is quite a good debater. So, I would like to debate him if he wants to debate me. Yeah, I think that it would be a win simply because it would introduce people to my books, and not that I'm the better debater, but it would introduce people to my books, and they might pick up a book or two or three or four, and I think that's where the debate actually takes place. So I'd be interested. Of course, I'll reiterate that, but I don't see him being interested for any time soon, and he's come up with all kinds of different reasons for why he doesn't debate me. And none of them make sense. None of them are consistent enough. One of them was he won't debate anybody who doesn't have a PhD. Well, he does. He has indeed debated people like that, most notably Christopher Hitchens. Of course, Christopher Hitchens was famous, so I guess either famous or a PhD. So maybe somebody who looks better on my resume than someone who looks better on your resume is what he's actually thinking. I don't know. But, I'd be interested in that, and I hope that that happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I think my books are debating him.
It's interesting that debate you mentioned, his debate with Christopher Hitchens. Me and a bunch of atheists got invited to a church, and we went to a church, and there was 100 people there to watch the debate from the church. And it was very interesting because, one, a lot of the people never knowingly met an atheist before, so that was fun. That was the valuable part.
Yeah.
The unfortunate part is, in my opinion, Christopher Hitchens dialed that one in, as I might call, and he just showed up for the check. It was a very, very poor attempt at a debate, and even at the very end when he had closing time, I think, if I recall correctly, he just yielded. and when it was over, the Christians would come up to me and say, well, who do you think won the debate? And I said, well, depending on your scoring method, I'm going to have to give it to William Lane Craig. And they're like, so did he convince you? And I go, oh, no, it's complete fiction. But as far as the entertainment value and the showmanship and performing on stage, he won. And that was very hard for me to say, but that's how it felt like to me. And they were all very happy. Then I'd have to try to explain to them that it is just entertainment. It is a show, and it doesn't mean that William Lane Craig is right about anything, but it made it fun anyway.
It's kind of too bad that, I guess it's too bad. I mean, I don't know of too many atheist debaters that do well in debates. I could name a few. I don't want to do that because I might miss somebody there. So, but some of the Christians, they've put forth some pretty good debaters. That doesn't mean anything, as far as the truth goes. And so, but one reason why I would like to debate him, and this might get back to him, I don't know, is simply because it would introduce me to his followers, his readers. And
right.
I just honestly don't think he wants to do that because I have a number of books that they might actually look them up and read them.
I like it. So where can people follow you? I know you have a blog. Where is that?
Yes. Yeah, just Google Debunking Christianity or my name, and you can find me. And on Amazon, I've got a bunch of books. It's on Barnes & Nobles and other online stores.
Excellent. Was there anything you wanted to cover that we haven't done yet?
No, that's fine. Thanks for focusing on the book Unapologetic. It's my most recent one, and I'm pretty pumped about it. It's come full circle. We talked about my first book, and the first published book that I have is Why I Became an Atheist. I was very respectful of Christian beliefs, and I tried to treat their beliefs with not only respect but also minute detail. And like I said, it's over 500 pages. I don't want to do it again. But this final book then comes full circle because I went from being totally respectful and and after like 9 books, I'm just I really don't respect your beliefs. I respect you as people.
Right.
Most of my friends are Christian. They're just hanging around. I don't have a lot of atheist friends where I live. It's just the respect is. It's hard to respect that belief system anymore. I've written about it until there's little left for me to write about, and it's all bunk. It's all cognitive bias run amok.
Well, and it can
no evidence for it. Yeah.
Well, and not only that, but it can be very difficult to respect someone. I mean, you respect them as a human, but it's very hard to respect their thought processes when you empirically show them that something they think or believe is false, but yet they can't seem to learn from it because
exactly
they're preconditioned to stick with what they've got.
Exactly, the deer in the headlights phenomena. I have talked with believers. I'm not an evangelistic atheist. People might think I am. I go knocking on doors or running from person to person in the mall to try to convince them otherwise. I don't do that hardly at all. Probably it's non-existent. I write my books and my blog and on Facebook, and I try to train people and teach people what I know, and they can go ahead and do that. Not that I don't do it, it's little. But I've seen that deer in the headlights phenomena so often after talking with people. It's stunning. After saying something or producing some kind of evidence or an argument, and then for them to just have a blank stare and say, I remember one guy in particular, he said, well, I don't know the answer to this, John, but you just got to have faith. And he smiled as if faith was a virtue. You just got to have faith, John. You don't have it, but I do. You just got to have faith. And I just was stunned, once again, at the vice of faith. At the faith gives them a confidence that is entirely unjustified.
Well, I had a case many years ago. I pretended to be a Missouri Synod Lutheran, but then stopped pretending, which I was very happy about. And we went back to see the confirmation of a friend's son. And when it was over, a couple of the elders came to talk to me and said, well, we don't see you around much anymore. I said, well, that's because I'm an atheist. And the one guy said, well, I can empirically prove to you that God is real. And I said, well, please, let's sit down and let's do that. And he's like, really? And I go, I mean, come on, man. If you've got the facts, if you've got the evidence, I want to know. Show me. And so he sat down and made one fallacious argument after another, and I would explain to him each step why it was wrong and why it wasn't a good argument and how it didn't go anywhere, and even if it did, it didn't lead to Yahweh. And after about 20 minutes, he got so frustrated, he turns to me and he says, well, it comes down to faith. And I usually would have that feeling that you had, but this time I had a divine intervention, and it popped into my head, and I said, oh, don't give up now. And he goes, I'm not giving up. And I said, yes, you are. You told me that you could empirically prove to me. And after only 20 minutes, you go to, it's all about faith. And he goes, well, it is. And I go, you don't even believe that yourself. You're now lying out loud. And he goes, no, I believe that. And I go, if you actually believed that was enough, you would have started with that. But you thought you had actual evidence. And when I showed you that the evidence didn't actually work, you gave up. and you've conceded the battle.
Yep.
And he just
True
walked away. But it probably didn't affect him at all, but it felt like fun for me.
Well, I wrote a book, kind of an unusual book. It doesn't get enough attention because it sounds strange. The title of the book is How to Defend the Christian's Faith, and it's subtitled Advice from an Atheist. It doesn't get enough attention because it sounds like I'm actually giving them advice. And in a way, I am. In the first part, I am. I'm telling them, if you want to be a good Christian apologist, then follow the evidence. I'm telling them, if you want to be a good Christian apologist, then you need to come up with an answer as to why you even need to exist as an apologist. Why are apologetics necessary? And things like that. And one of the things is you need to get a good education, and you don't need to go to an apologetics program because you're entering a program most likely of your own denomination, and you're going to be taught your denomination's, stance on this, that, and the other. You need to test your faith against professors in fields that threaten your faith, and that's how you're going to be an apologist. Go study with anthropologists. Go study with scientists and who focus on evolution. I give them good. I mean, it's actually good advice what I'm giving them, and a lot more actually. Don't go to a college that has students sign a creedal statement and things like that, and quite detailed. But one of those things, as I said, don't trust your brain. I know this, and a lot more besides that is in this book. But don't trust your brain. We know the brain lies to us. It gets back to your conversation with that guy. We know the brain lies to us. It deceives us if we let it, and that's where we allow faith to run amok, or cognitive biases to run amok. And to one way to train your brain, I give some ways to train your brain to think reasonably, rationally, and that's simply to follow the evidence. Don't just go by what someone says. Don't just go by what you want to believe. Don't just go by how you were raised about anything. Be skeptical about this and be skeptical about that. Cultivate a skeptical disposition and demand evidence. Think a courtroom jury, if you will. You have to demand evidence. Don't just believe it. Demand evidence. So I gave them some good advice. I wanted to plug that book a little bit, but since you had mentioned the brain lying, I wanted to comment on the fact that, yes, we know the brain lies.
Well, I'll tell the listeners one more time, of course. It's John W. Loftus. You can go to Amazon, any good bookstore. A whole bunch of books. We didn't even talk about all of them. Find one that you think you might like and check it out, or buy it and listen to it. Many of them are now in audiobook format, which I love. You've got the blog, where you write very lengthy discussions about religion. So listeners, go check that out. And John, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Phil Ferguson Show.
Well, thanks, Phil. I'm honored that you asked me. I appreciate it so much.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, bye.
I want to thank you for listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. It is a unique combination of 1/3 finance and 2/3 atheism. The show is number 1 in that category. I want to promote the philosophy of science-based investing. Sadly, most advisors are paid commissions by a big company to sell you investments that underperform. Sometimes they make more money with your money than you do. I think the financial services industry is a lot like religion. They create fear. They provide a solution to that fear. They take your money, and they often get more benefit from it than you do. Remember, people work for who they are paid by. You want a fiduciary advisor that is paid only by you. If you have questions about investments, want to roll over an old 401k, or need to make a plan to build your very own everlasting nest egg, you may contact me, Phil, at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com. Together, we can protect children from religion, promote a secular worldview, fight the grip religion has on our society, and improve your financial future.
John Widdicombe says slavery has to be considered in context. What's more relative than that? There were people at the time, Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, there were innumerable humanists and secularists who said slavery is evil. The church wouldn't agree. Now, which is it then? Is it that the church is wrong, or, even more suggestive, that God has not yet revealed that it's wrong to them? Or did God support it all those years and then change his mind? From a beginning point of absurdity, you arrive at a terminal point of absolute moral chaos. And I think you've at least done us the favor of making that plain this evening. God, in short, God did not make man in his own image. It is precisely to the contrary. Mammals and primates made many gods and many churches in their own rival images.
Hopefully you enjoyed that interview as much as I enjoyed making that interview with John W. Loftus. Go check out his website. If you're into philosophy, go read his books. If you're into learning more about religion and why there's no substantiation for it. And, of course, he's convinced me that we should no longer have a department called philosophy of religion or classes on it. It's just, there's no evidence for it. Let's move on to the modern world. The other thing I have is one more email. It is a correction, and it's from DN, and I'm just going to read it to you here. Phil, as a former Catholic, I could not help but notice the inaccuracy of your statements about oils used at baptism in episode 194. I have not gone back to listen to 194, so I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure I was talking about a story when we went to someone that had a baptism and they flipped the oils around. There may indeed be plenty of, in Catholicism, worthy of mockery. I agree. But we don't do any good in misstating religious beliefs. Catholics do not believe the oils used have any power at all, but are symbolic, historically based upon the use of oils in daily life. Mock on, but please know what you're talking about. So, DN, thank you for the correction. Again, I don't know that I said that they were literally, because I would have never fantasized that they would actually literally put Jesus or the demons in the baby. So I don't know what Catholics do or don't believe, so I may have made it sound like they literally think that happens. If I did, then I'm now corrected. Catholics apparently don't literally believe these oils help demons or Jesus enter the body. It's purely symbolic. Well, it's stupid fucking symbolism, so I will continue to mock that, but noted that Catholics themselves do not literally think that it happens. Although I do know that they literally think it happens when they do exorcisms. So it's so hard for me to keep track of all the little details about what any one specific religion literally does or doesn't believe. But I will defer to the expertise of a former Catholic. And that will wrap up the show. Just as a quick reminder, for the first 6 months of 2017, my expectation is to not be at any conventions per se, but I am doing a speaking tour. Last year it was California, LA through San Francisco. And this year I'm going East Coast, and probably next episode I'll have the detailed list for you, but it looks like I'm going to be around places like Philadelphia, and I think there's one talk scheduled in New Jersey, Washington, D.C., and York, Pennsylvania, and one more. I think there's 5 total that are going to happen in a very quick succession around very late March, early April, so that weekend that covers that time period. And it's right after I get to go see Green Day in concert. So I'm very excited. I see Green Day in concert. The next morning, I get on a plane, and I will spend one entire week in southeastern Pennsylvania, Maryland, Washington, D.C., New Jersey area of the country. So looking very forward to that. If you're in that area, please stay tuned for the details, and I'll share in the next week or two. I'll have all the locations so you can plan out in advance. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. I greatly appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon. Ciao.